Hi, everyone, and good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Eitan Bremner, VP Corporate Development here at Safety. I wanted to thank you for joining this webinar today, where we will discuss the first ever joint zero trust biometric solution between Safety and ImageWare. With me, we have Mark Blackman, VP Product Management at ImageWare. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Eitan. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. So hi, everyone, again. The purpose of our joint webinar today is to present Safety Zone Zero, our Zero Trust Network Access platform, and ImageWare, our partner and biometric multi-factor authentication vendor. Mark will present ImageWare and will show how the solutions work together, a short demo, and then open it up for questions at the end. So thanks again for joining. So a bit about Safety for you who don't know who we are. We are a publicly traded company out of Israel. I'm personally based out of Israel. Global in the sense that we have offices in the US, across Europe, in a variety of companies like Spain, Germany, UK, Italy, etc., Asia Pac, Africa. So global in that sense. Channel-oriented company, selling through channels, through partners, OEM partners, MSSP partners, and also covered by all the leading analysts for zero trust network access. So you can look at Gartner, Forrester. If there's a ZTNA report or SDP report, most likely we are a referenced vendor. So I'll hand it over to Mark to briefly cover ImageWare.
Thanks, Eitan. For over 30 years, ImageWare has been pioneering the use of multiple biometrics for both identification and authentication. We have cloud and on-prem solutions that provide a higher level of security to both public and private organizations through identity with biometric certainty. We believe that this higher level of user assurance is critical to any robust zero trust solution, and are delighted to be partnering with the Zero Trust leadership of Safety to bring this combined solution to the marketplace.
Thank you, Mark. So let's start, diving deep into the world of zero trust network access and the need. So the world for zero trust network access was born right out of the need to connect a wide range of users into our networks. If you look at the mapping of users we have here, organizations can have corporate employees, people in the office, and third-party vendors and remote workers, contractors, supply chain, work from home users, many different types of users with different types of needs. Some are employees, some are business partners, all connecting today to our corporate applications, be them on-premise or off-premise. And because we have this very wide range of users, some of them in still COVID-related countries where there are still lockdowns, so work-from-home users are a growing type of user, the perimeter has grown immensely, right? We have people coming over many different clients from different locations, all wanting to connect to our resources. Now, today, the prevalent technology for connecting users into our networks are VPNs, whether they're portal-based VPNs or tunnel-based VPNs. The concept is the same. We have VPNs around for the last 20 years. VPNs are a single gateway. They do authentication, they do authorization, they control access, and grant us access to resources. Now, depending on the VPN, if it's a portal-based VPN, we access HTTP applications and we're relatively isolated from the network, but still the VPN is a single machine. We access the VPN from a browser, it authenticates us, and then it connects us to the backend application. If we're talking tunnel-based VPNs, again, we open our VPN client, connect to the VPN gateway. That, again, is an access step. The VPN then authenticates us and then grants us physical access into the network, what we call layer 2 tunneling into the network. Now, while VPNs are a trusted and technology, they have VPNs their problems. right, or their issues. From a security perspective, we're not separating authentication from access, right? The same machine does authentication, does access. We access before we are authenticated. So even if we are not authenticated, we know the VPN exists. We can try attacking it, and we've seen VPN hacks over 2020 and 2021. Authentication is relatively limited, right? And if you have legacy VPNs that don't even support multi-factor, or the multi-factor is of that VPN vendor, there's no mix and match. And if we're talking tunnel-based VPN, it's physical access, right? We're getting layer 2 access into the network, which basically allows us lateral movement. Once I'm in the network, I can start roaming the network and see which other applications exist. From an operational perspective, the VPNs don't scale, right? Especially if they're client-based. You need to install clients on your machine, so it's relatively high OpEx. It basically requires managed devices, our employees, not necessarily our contractors. What do we do with work from home users, where people connect from their home desktops? And it's mainly human users. So I'm not saying VPNs are a problem. They have their issues. We know they're here to stay. A lot of organizations are going to continue to use their VPNs, but a lot of organizations are understanding VPNs don't fit all scenarios. They might be good for employees, but we want different solutions for non-employees or for work from home users, especially when, as we said, the technology is a technology which has been hacked, which hasn't been penetrated. So the solution here, the solution the world is looking at for new remote access is based on zero trust, or specifically zero trust network access. And zero trust network access, or ZTNA, is part of the zero trust market. And within zero trust, we're talking about 3 main pillars. 1, continuous authentication. We want to authenticate users not only at the beginning of the session, but also during the session. VPNs only authenticate users at the beginning of the sessions. We don't have continuous authentication during the session or for specific applications. We want to grant least access privilege, which means once the user authenticates, we grant them access only to specific applications according to their identity, and of course, monitoring and enforcement. The idea, trust nothing, always verify. We want to continuously authenticate and control the user, and only authenticated users are granted access to specific applications. And we're seeing zero trust grow in the market, ZTNA as being a more common technology. Awareness is growing, but still, we're here to educate what is zero trust and why is ZTNA required. We're here to introduce both Zone Zero and ImageWare, right? Zone Zero, our ZTNA product, ImageWare, the biometric zero trust vendor and biometric MFA. Together, we feel we're creating a very, very strong solution for zero trust with advanced biometric authentication. So we'll start by talking about Zone Zero. I'll present Zone Zero and then hand it over to Mark, who will run us through the ImageWare platform. So Zone Zero, software-based solution, a platform we deploy in our network, and it controls and unifies all access use cases. So regardless where the user is coming from in the network, VPN users, non-VPN users, Zone Zero can control access of those users to corporate resources. We do this by combining safety's best-of-breed technologies, whether it's our reverse access patent, which controls how we transfer data in and out of the organization, our SDP, or software-defined perimeter technology, which is how we control non-VPN users or remote access for non-VPN users, integration to VPN providers to control VPN users, and integration to multi-factor and identity provider solutions such as ImageWare to bundle and connect and orchestrate multi-factor authentication into the access flow. The idea is we can support now any user, whether it's a managed user or non-managed user, with the same platform, and support any application. Any TCP-based application you can think of, we can support with the advanced MFA, and we'll show you how we do this. And we can do continuous MFA. We can authenticate the user at the beginning of the session. We can also authenticate the user during the session to do step-up authentication where required. In a sense, Safety Zone Zero is a clientless solution. You do not require a safety client to operate. If we're using ImageWare, you will see we need the ImageWare biometric mobile client, but we don't need a desktop client to connect. So I'll now hand it over to Mark for him to explain to us a bit about ImageWare before we go and show you the joint solution.
Thank you. Thank you. So ImageWare Authenticate is our biometric-based MFA solution. It could provide passwordless access. I think we all know the well-known costs and liabilities associated with passwords. For example, just days ago, the ROC U 2021 breach compromised 8.4 billion accounts, and we strongly believe biometrics has a prominent place for reducing or eliminating this risk. Additionally, we use cloud-based biometrics. We support all the authentication factors such as PIN or actually an on-device biometric stored in the secure enclave of the phone, but we also provide cloud-based biometrics. This allows authentication beyond your mobile phone authenticator, enabling movement across a number of devices. This is valuable when you have groups of people sharing a pool of devices, such as in a call center or factory floors. Additionally, it reduces the risk and cost of binding and rebinding identities to a specific device, many times which are outside of the control of the organization protecting their assets. We also provide passive liveness detection or anti-spoofing. Anti-spoofing is critical to any biometric solution, ensuring that the biometrics are actually live and of the subject who is authenticating. We're able to perform this anti-spoofing in a single frame image through AI, allowing this check to be done without user-guided movements or actions, such as blinking or turning right, which a lot of our competitors deploy. This reduces the friction and the time associated with authentication tasks, which, if you're doing continuous authentication, can add up to be a lot of time and a lot of friction throughout a workday. Additionally, it's easy to use for the users. We have intuitive iOS and Android authenticators really designed to be intuitive and user-friendly. We support today's applications through OIDC and SAML, allowing you to easily integrate through configuration to cloud services such as Salesforce, Box, and others. Additionally, it's very admin-friendly. We have a self-service portal. You could just get an account and start testing and using it, but it could also scale, and you could do user management and other things to make administration of the service friendly. Additionally, it is very flexible in what admins can do with the service. So for example, you could set up specific authentication policies based on the task or the assets you are protecting. For example, for general authentication, you could leave it up to the user to decide based on their environment. If they're in a dark setting, they may want to use voice authentication versus image authentication, for example. Additionally, you could configure nested biometrics or multiple biometrics for a single authentication. So for example, if you're offering up root access to a sensitive system, you could require the user to give not only a PIN, not only an on-device authentication, but also a cloud-based face biometric authentication. From a user standpoint, very analogous to today's authenticators. Again, with that extra horsepower of biometrics. Basically, after the service has been invoked by either an organization or a direct service, the user will receive a secure push, which will prompt them based on the policy configured by the administrator for either a PIN or a biometric or other. At this point, the user simply follows the intuitive instructions on the screen, provides their biometrics, and then in the back end, we do that liveness assurance, and then matching, and then return the result to the requesting service, either a pass or a fail. So very frictionless, intuitive from a user standpoint. Typically, authentications last between 5 seconds to 10 seconds on the system. Thanks, Eitan. Back to you.
Thanks, Mark. So the idea is to combine Safety Zone 0 and ImageWare Authenticate. As you can see here, placing the solution, and we'll dive into more architecture diagrams in a second, but placing the solution between all types of users, be them our corporate employees, our work from home users, our remote workers, or our partners, third-party vendors, contractors, supply chain, between all of those users and our corporate applications. And this is an unrivaled solution, right? It's the only joint solution in the market which offers biometric ZTNA, right? This combination is very unique and one of its kind in the world. Now, we have three main use cases where we did an integration. The first use case is what we call the non-VPN user access. The idea here is to combine Zone 0 and ImageWare to support all non-VPN users. So we work in parallel or instead of the existing VPN solutions. You can either replace the VPN with our solution, or we can work side by side the VPN. It uses the safety patented reverse access technology and the biometric authentication of ImageWare. We separate authentication from access. Users first authenticate and only then are granted access. And the joint solution supports all legacy applications and protocols because we do authentication prior to access. This allows us to do authentication agnostic to the application. And once users authenticated, grant them application level access to prevent lateral movement. The joint solution looks as follows. We deploy the safety solution, the access controller, authentication gateway, and access gateway. Access controller integrates with ImageWare Authenticate. Could be an on-prem deployment of ImageWare or a cloud-based deployment of ImageWare. Okay, they support both options. The controller has the routing and connectivity to the different backend applications. And as we'll see in the demo at the end of the session, everything is managed by the controller. A user on the left wanting to connect to a resource on the right opens a browser pointing to the authentication gateway, inputs their initial username, the controller goes out, picks up the username, and does an initial verification with the Active Directory, and then sends an OIDC redirection for that user to ImageWare. The user then works vis-a-vis ImageWare with the ImageWare mobile phone biometric client to get authenticated. The response is then sent back to the access controller, confirming the user. At that point, the access controller sends a command to the access gateway, opening access for the user to connect. At that point, as we will see, all the user needs to do is launch the relevant client application. If I want to connect to RDP, all I need to do is open my RDP client, point it to the access gateway, which is now accepting my traffic, and connect. The controller goes out, picks up the traffic, sending it to the RDP machine. The same can be with any other application, whether it's file shares, financial applications, legacy applications, SSHs, SFTPs. All the user needs is that relevant client application. Of course, we'll do all of this with our reverse access patent, which means everything is outbound. Everything is controller initiated, so the firewall is configured from the inside out. And the best authentication, biometric authentication, ensuring the user is who they claim they are. A second use case For this is also what we call the hybrid cloud deployment. Because safety offers virtual machines, you, the customer, can choose how to deploy the solution. Fully on-prem, as we saw before, hybrid, where the controller is on-prem, gateways in the cloud. It's all up to the choice of the customer, including which ImageWare version to use, on-prem or cloud. We also support VPN user access, right? So as opposed to other ZTNA vendors who only want to replace the VPN or support non-VPN users, Zone Zero and ImageWare Authenticate can also support VPN users. We work with the existing VPN as well. Again, taking the Zone Zero capabilities of the patented reverse access technology, separating authentication from access, application level access, and clientless, combining this with the biometric authentication from ImageWare, and allowing us to support also VPN users. In this case, when a user connects, they initially connect with their VPN client. Now, this could be any commercial VPN client. The VPN would authenticate the user based on Active Directory, etc. And after authenticating the user, the VPN sends a message to Zone Zero, updating it that the new user has been connected. At that point, Zone Zero issues an MFA using ImageWare to the user. This is a REST-based MFA command. At that point, the user will authenticate biometric to ImageWare. If the user fails to authenticate, the VPN Zone Zero is closed, so the user cannot pass from the VPN into the network. Only after the user finishes authenticating biometrically is Zone Zero open and accepting the tunnel from the VPN. And at that point, when the user connects, we connect the user to the application. Disconnecting the user from the network, we're elevating the user to application level access. And even though the user is using a tunnel-based VPN in this case, they are not tunneled into the network. So we're getting, on the one hand, advanced multi-factor authentication using biometric credentials, plus application level access and prevention of lateral movement and disconnecting the user from the network. On top of this, when the user connects to a specific application, we can do re-authentication. We can do re-MFA for the user when a user connects to a specific backend application. Again, adding step-up authentication on existing VPN solutions. Last but not least, we also support internal users. In this case, we use what we call LDAP proxying, okay, and connecting to ImageWare. So when a user connects to an LDAP-based application, that application, for example, SSH or a database or legacy application, would request Zone Zero to authenticate the user, as opposed to authenticating by itself or through AD. So if the user goes through the SSH server, for example, that will ask Zone Zero MFA to authenticate the user. Zone Zero would initially go to the Active Directory to authenticate the user, and then invoke ImageWare to do a biometric authentication. This allows us to add biometric MFA for internal users going to internal applications. This is the first time you can actually do biometric MFA for internal applications without the need to touch the actual application. No agents required, no customization of the application required. All you need is the ImageWare solution, the Zone Zero solution, and the ImageWare mobile client. So these are the different options we support. Again, could be non-VPN users, VPN users, or internal users. And before we wrap up and pass to questions, let me share with you a short demo of what the solution looks for the non-VPN users. So what you can see here, this authentication portal is what a user sees when they initially connect to the Safety Zone Zero solution. And we see here also on the right-hand side, the mobile app by ImageWare for the MFA, the biometric MFA. So we start by entering our credentials into the authentication portal. At this point, the controller went out, picked up the credentials, went to the Active Directory, authenticated the user, and then send a OAuth2 request redirect to the user, pointing them to the ImageWare solution. Now we authenticate to ImageWare, okay? And now we are based on the ImageWare policy, whether it's push notification, face recognition. In this case, you will see I will need to do a selfie on the phone. I can do palm, face. In this case, I do a selfie to authenticate myself. And only after I'm authenticated, I'm redirected back to the authentication portal. Based on my identity, on my group, that defines the applications I can connect to. You can see I have access to 2 applications, a web app and an RDP app. Now, if I want to connect to RDP, all I need to do, launch my RDP client, point it to, you can see here, the access gateway. So this is not a reflection. This is actual RDP client. Point it to the access gateway, which is now open, and I'm connected to my RDP machine. So as you can see, we combine here the application level access of Zone 0 and Zero Trust Network Access with biometric multi-factor authentication without needing to touch the application, completely agentless. So going back to the presentation, I want to thank you for joining, and I'll pass it to Mark if you have any closing remarks before we pass it on to questions.
Yeah, thank you. No, I really believe in this combined solution, and I think biometric-based assurance and user assurance and the flexibility of having that in the cloud under the control of the organization is a win-win solution and a major step within zero trust network access solutions. So delighted to be involved. And at this point, would like to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mark. So if any of the participants has any questions, feel free to write them in the questions section, and we will answer them.
We must have been comprehensive in our description. Okay, here we go. Great. So we did receive one question. How is this different from VM Workspace 1? Adding biometric layer, perhaps? Thoughts? I personally am not familiar with VMware Workspace 1. Eitan, are you?
So I can take that, Mark.
Okay, great.
So VMware Workspace 1 is more of an application publishing solution, and mainly web apps and stuff like this. What we do is we are agnostic to the environment. You use Zero Trust Network Access to provide clientless access to any application by doing authentication before access. The idea is that we are clientless with the integration with ImageWare to do the biometric authentication. And the idea here is that we can even front end VMware Workspace 1, right? So if imagine you have VMware Workspace 1 in your network, today you would most likely need a VPN to connect to it if you're coming from the outside. So we are a VPN replacement in this sense. We can act as the front end for the Workspace 1. Do we have any examples of customers who have deployed this? So at the moment, since this is a newly launched solution, we don't have any joint customers as of yet. We do have some pilots in the pipeline. In regarding, there was a question here, what are some additional differentiation between safety and ImageWare solution and competitors? So each vendor onto its own has its own differentiators, right? Safety competes versus other ZTNA vendors. ImageWare competes with other MFA vendors. So, we can always dive deep into the specific competition. But the joint solution is unique. There's no other solution like this where a ZTNA vendor has MFA capabilities, a biometric MFA, I must add. So in this case, we are unique, and you get the best of both worlds: a very good ZTNA solution and a very, very good biometric MFA solution. Another question is, what are the current methods of authentication? I'll let Mark answer this.
Sure. So currently we have PIN that could be used, what you know. We do secure push to the device, so that would be device. And we support finger and facial on-device authentication. And then with regards to cloud-based biometrics, we offer palm, face, and voice. In addition to this, as I mentioned before, we have the flexibility through configuration policies and nesting to use one or any number of these biometrics and modalities.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Any other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, I want to thank you for joining. This webinar will be stored on our BrightTalk channel, so you can watch it on demand. And thank you again, Mark, for joining. And everybody have a good day.
Thank you.